Welcome to Inspiring Perspectives, a podcast by thinkPARALLAX featuring fresh takes and bold ideas for the real world's sustainability challenges and solutions at some of the world's most respected brands and companies. I'm your host, Derek Sabori, and this is what sustainability sounds like today. Well, hey everyone, welcome to Inspiring Perspectives. Welcome back to the show. If you haven't been here before, I'm Derek Sabori, and this is a show where I chat with experts in this space with the aim of delivering really valuable takeaways and actionable advice on a wide range of topics that are being talked about in corporate sustainability. And so today, I'm turning to Jill Stoneberg, Senior Director, Social Impact and Sustainability at Voyages. Jill, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Derek. It's great to be here.
I'm excited to have you here because this is our second time sitting together. We've done a podcast episode before, and the last time we did it together, we really spoke about your journey, your career journey, how you got into this space, how long you've been focusing. You knew you wanted to do this work for a long time, so you've been studying, applying, and really working in sustainability for a minute now, right? It's been some time.
It's been a while.
And I mean that not like, oh my gosh, but it's like you've got a lot of experience that you can share, and that's what I'm excited to share with the audience today. So, Jill, you've been a sustainability consultant, you've been a corporate responsibility manager for the tech company Avaya, you were a sustainability manager at Intuit, and with that said, you've seen what works and what doesn't when it comes to really building sustainability programs, setting goals, implementing initiatives. So I want to tap into that. First thing I want to do, though, is really talk about the exciting work that you get to do at Voyages. You want to tell us a little bit about your role and some of the cool things that you guys are working on right now?
Sure, happy to. Well, even though I've been in this role and in this space for a long time, I learn new things every day. So it really is an exciting type of profession to work in different industries and always be thinking about how can we make the world a better place? How can we create positive change inside of corporations and do good? So in my role at Voyages, I work across all of our teams in the business to make sure that we are staying true to our company purpose, which we define as changing business for good. And that looks different depending on the team that I'm working with, but it's everything from decarbonization to making sure we have supplier responsibility practices in place, to working with our tour operators and our communities and making sure that we're showing up in a positive way in the destinations that we sail to. So as a cruise line, there's a lot of things that happen to make a voyage possible. It's basically a small town floating on the water. So a lot goes into thinking about how to do that in the most sustainable way.
Yeah, and earlier this year, you launched your 2023 impact report. It's called Change You Can See, and a lot of those things that you just talked about are in that report. But what are some of the highlights from that report that you think are noteworthy? I mean, there's a lot of great stuff in there, and it's a fun read. But what stands out to you of things that were in that report?
Yeah, well, we really try to take a light touch approach to our reporting. And so we use it with various stakeholders to engage our audiences and tell a story. So everything that's in there is everything from, how we comply with regulations to what are some ambitions that we have for delivering a really innovative product and experience on board. So every year we refresh this report. And the last year when we did this, some of the key highlights were doing our first sustainable marine fuels pilot, which took place in September of 2023. So we used biofuels for the first time. That was a really big milestone for us on our decarbonization journey. Other highlights included launching our third ship out of Greece and doing impact projects in Greece to celebrate the launch of that ship. And we did it again in Australia later that year. So we highlighted those stories of how every time we come out with a new ship, we really try to lean into that and do some good in the community and get our crew excited and involved. And so we're really pleased with how that turned out. And then the other pieces in the report were an expansion of previous year's reports, like how we have furthered our commitments to diversity and inclusion, how we are continuing to report out on our energy waste and water footprint and our carbon footprint. And so each year we tend to expand on the detail to make sure that we're giving a very well-rounded, robust story, but we also don't shy away from highlighting those accomplishments on the experience side. We're an award-winning cruise line. We continue to outshine in the market, and so we also have those highlights in there as well.
Yeah, and that's so cool. Congratulations on those awards. I know I'm going to touch on those a little bit later because I think it's really exciting and something I know you're proud of. Once you put your report out, how have stakeholders responded, or how do they typically respond? And do you see sort of the audience evolving in terms of how engaged they are and how excited they are about your report? Or do you is the fanfare just sort of like, and you just have to do a report because you have to do a report? What does the audience say?
Yeah, so, like I said, we have different audiences that we use our report for in terms of engagement. And, I wish I could have like a firsthand account of how everyone absorbs that report. But,
right.
We use it with crew onboarding. We use it with our travel agents. We use it in communication with our destinations and our port agents and our tour operators. We use it like as a marketing piece, but we also use it to communicate what we do to audiences that really don't understand how a cruise ship operates. So in terms of how it's been received, I think overall the big takeaway usually is, wow, like I didn't know you all did so much as far as your commitments and how they're really embedded into your everyday practices. So it really is informative and useful, but we really try to, like I said, tell a story and make it engaging so that you actually want to read it, right? Or if you don't want to read it, you can flip through it and get the key highlights.
Yeah, and on that engagement part, I think something that we were really excited to see once we launched the report, that you had a great video that you put out that was basically in sync and in step with that report, broken down into the same. It was almost like a live version, a mini live version of the report. Tell us a little bit about what it took to get that video produced and what was the impetus behind it?
Yeah. So, we know that a report, while necessary, to give the detail isn't always the way that people want to consume content, right? I would say the vast majority these days, right. Anyway, it's all about videos and telling stories. So
right.
I'm really, really pleased with how the video turned out this past year. And we took an approach that was, not very traditional, where it wasn't a lot of talking heads from senior leadership. We actually featured our entertainment team on board, and we had them tell the story. And so it's very virgin. It's very it's high level, but it's detailed at the same time. So it's 10 minutes, but it goes like you don't even realize it's 10 minutes. It feels like it's a few minutes. But yeah, that was a really fun video to create and show. The purpose of it was to show how we embed sustainability into the experience that you have on board. And the audience for that was really our guests on board. We call them our sailors. We wanted them to know a little bit more about how we've been intentional in putting sustainability at the core of the business and how that shows up in the day-to-day aspects of what they experience.
Yeah, and to add to that, I think, you touched on it, but it's an authentic piece, right? It's on brand. It's very well produced. Yeah. It's high quality. It's definitely not some corporate video.
Right.
It's entertaining, but it's informative, and it is a great representation of the brand. But not only that, it really brings the report to life. So you can kind of have those two things, and they work hand in hand, really complementary. So that was a big round of applause to you guys for doing that. That was really fun.
Thank you so much. Yeah, we got a lot of positive feedback from that.
Yeah. So the only thing we need now is sort of like can we add a QR code in there so they can go directly to the exciting PDF version of what they just watched?
Yeah, exactly. If you want to dive in.
Yeah.
Click
Jill,
here.
Speaking of diving in, I mean, you've been doing this long enough that reporting is changing, right? It's evolving. It's becoming more crucial. There are more eyes on it. You need more information in there, more disclosures. And if you're doing business in Europe, you're starting to prepare for CSRD compliance. But from your perspective, how has the report and reporting changed, I think? And how has it changed? How have you seen it evolve and change, and where it's headed? How do you feel about it?
Yeah, I mean, again, we do the report for us. It's voluntary, but it's a really useful tool to communicate what we're doing. As I look at the horizon on reporting, there's a lot of regulations now. We have brands shying away from talking about their sustainability commitments for fear of greenwashing. And so it's an interesting time, I would say, reporting in general. And we don't need to comply with CSRD, so we're not doing the whole double materiality, but we are keeping a watch on that. And we want to be staying abreast of what are the disclosures that investors need to see. As we grow and mature as a company, we want to be ready for those. And, we want to make sure, too, that we are communicating where are our risks and opportunities as a brand, and that we're being, truthful about that, and as far as what information we share in a report. So I would say overall, the direction that I see reporting going into is making sure that you have audit-ready data that's similar to how your financial data would be audited, making sure that your ESG data is in a place where it can be verified and substantiated. And also, you're having to follow now a very specific framework in some cases based on regulation. So I see it becoming very detailed and thorough reporting. But I also see the need to keep reporting in a way where, depending on your objectives, keep it informational in a way that people want to consume that content. So I think it's a really interesting tension and balance that brands have to strike, right? Because you want people to read your report, especially if you're really taking a robust approach and you have to follow a certain structure. So it's how do you do that while keeping it interesting and engaging so people want to read it?
Well, and I think for us, as we work in this space and talk with our clients, that is a big part of it. And I think there's an opportunity to really now probably split up your report so that you're aligning with what's required for ESRS alignment or CSRD for the different frameworks. Kind of keep that as sort of the business end of reporting. Answer the questions, keep them organized, use the language that you need to for the standardized approach, but then have a report that can really then be freed to live in sort of that storytelling world that is a little bit more relaxed. It's informative. You're not held to those constraints. So I think this is an opportunity, for brands to kind of be cut free. It's almost liberating, if you will. But I wonder, we always kind of laugh sometimes when we talk about this with guests, because if you've been doing this long enough, you sort of got to act in a vacuum and not in a silo. Actually, this is the wrong word because that's the language we always try to move away from. But you didn't have a lot of eyes on what you were doing. You were sort of entrusted with the program, with your reporting. But now it seems like everybody's involved, right? Your comms team is involved. The legal department is involved. Your board is asking questions. Everybody's eyes are on what you're saying, how you're saying it. How are we rated? How are we ranked? Has that affected your role in the work that you're doing as well? And is that a good thing or a bad thing?
Yeah, it's tricky. I would say that because, we're privately held, there hasn't been a whole lot of scrutiny as far as, we're not a risk-adverse brand. Let's put it that way. So, our intent has been share our story, share it in a virgin way, be honest, be transparent, and be mindful of where reporting is going, right? So we're always doing everything in earnest. But I will say, we've looked at other reporting standards, and should we be moving on, moving our reporting to align with a specific framework. And right now we do SASB because we feel like that's the one that's most applicable in terms of the investor audience. But yeah, I mean, there's hesitation, I think, you see from brands, even internally, like what should we disclose? What are our peers disclosing? Do we have to disclose this or that? And so it's something that we have to be mindful of, but you're absolutely right. You have to engage all those players to make sure everybody is signing off before you make a report public. That everyone is aligned, everyone feels comfortable and is nodding their heads in agreement that this is what we should put out into the world. So it does seem like there's more hesitation these days, not necessarily for us as a brand, but it's what I see, kind of scanning what other companies are experiencing, that there's more reluctancy maybe to report out on certain aspects because of fear that you could be held to something later for legal reasons.
Yeah, and we just did an episode on kind of the three G's: green washing, green hushing, and then something we called green blushing, or that, not our term, but that we've heard out there. And it's this idea, right? You're either, in the past, people were worried about putting the wrong thing out there, whether it was intentional or not. So then people kind of got quiet and said, well, then we're not going to say anything at all. But we think there's an opportunity to really speak about what you're doing, share it with your audience, communicate, but that's in a way that is authentic, and it doesn't have to be perfect, but it's connecting with humans as, with us as humans, as imperfect as we are, but just being honest and authentic. And I think that's where Virgin Voyages leans, is having that real authentic, natural voice that feels like, hey, you're speaking to me as a person, not as a bot who's reading your report. I think, you mentioned a couple of the awards that you guys have won, or at least one of them, but I mean, Virgin Voyages is Travel and Leisure's best cruise ship again. So you guys have won, you won that for 2024, and you've only been at sea for 3 years. You were also, Virgin Voyages was Condé Nast Traveler's #1 cruise in the large ship category again. So you're a repeat winner. You also just celebrated that milestone of implementing shore power infrastructure to allow cruise ships to plug in while at port. So there's a lot of cool things that have happened since the report launched, but you want to touch on any of those, sort of the award winning or that shore power infrastructure?
Yeah, well, I mean, kudos to our experience team and our brand team here, who just keep knocking it out of the park.
Right.
And if you go on board, you will have the best time ever. So I can't say I'm surprised. Everyone here truly believes in the brand, and what we're creating is something that's really innovative and truly special. So it's great to be getting that acknowledgement from, these industry awards and travel awards. So I can't really speak to that. That's a different side of the business, but really proud, that we can all celebrate those achievements. Sorry, I forgot your other point, the other question.
The shore power.
Yeah, shore power. So shore power is a big step for us. It's a big step for the industry. And that we did celebrate in June at Port of Miami, which is considered the cruise capital of the world, that we now are getting the infrastructure in place for cruise ships to be able to plug in and use the power from the local electricity grid. So that's what shore power is. It allows you to turn off your engines and still run your critical operations. And rather than burning fuel in port, you're leveraging power from the grid, which is better for the environment and especially local air quality.
Right.
So, yeah, it's a big deal. We haven't yet plugged in because our connection isn't ready, but there is a connection in place, and it's going to be 5 different berths, they call them, for the cruise ships to be able to plug in. So essentially, all the brands that come to Port Miami on a regular basis will be taking turns across those 5 berths to plug into shore power. So we're really looking forward to being able to plug in. It'll be our turn coming up here in the next couple of months. So we're really excited about that.
Yeah, that is really exciting, and I know it's nice to see you as part of the push to change the industry as well, sort of a leader in that space. So congratulations on all of that. there's been a lot that you've accomplished there. And I know, from our conversations, there's still a lot more that you want to do. What was
Hmm.
it like though? I mean, because you came on board, no pun intended, but you came on board and started building a program before the first ship had even set sail. Is that correct?
That's right. Yeah, 2018. And we were supposed to launch in 2020. And we know what happened there.
Mm.
So it was delayed. But yeah, the groundwork was being laid in 2018, even before I started actually, to create what now is an operation and will soon be welcoming our fourth ship into the fleet, our fourth and final ship for now, into the fleet next year.
So, what would you say? What did it take to make all this progress that you have made? Of course, a lot of that can be attributed to you and your position, but I'm sure there are other factors. I would imagine leadership plays a role, right? Getting the team on board, maybe the investors, maybe the board. I don't know, but
Yeah.
what did it take to help you guys get to where you're at in terms of your sustainability program?
Yeah, for sure. Well, number one, I definitely cannot take credit for, what we've been able to accomplish on the sustainability side. It has been a collective team effort,
Mm.
and I attribute the success to what we have been able to do is it's really due to the vision that our leaders have had from the very beginning. So from the very beginning of the brand being created on paper at first, right, was a commitment to being a company with a purpose and this changing business for good purpose. And we've translated that into creating an epic sea change for all, is the term we use. But at its core, it's really about creating positive change for people and the planet. And so because that was the foundation from everything from the sailor experience that we were building on board to how we operate the ship and treat our oceans to how we treat our communities to the operational decisions that we were going to have, like not to have single-use plastics, that foundation was there before I even joined the company. And
Mm.
so it was a really solid place then to start to create a framework and build off of that foundation and create specific programs then to make sure, one, we were upholding the vision and the ambitions that we had, but two, to further the commitment, embed it, and make sure we were focusing on continuous improvement. So it really did come from the foundational aspect first. And then where I would like to take some credit, where I think some credit is due, is just making sure that the collaboration across the teams has come to a place where, everybody's taking ownership of the
Mm.
vision, and we are developing programs to, implement specific initiatives and see them through to completion. And the teams have been great because it's been a shared journey and everybody's bought in on the vision and the purpose that we have.
What do you think it was? How would you define sort of success in terms of making sure that message gets across? What was it that leadership there did? Of course, I would imagine there had to be more than just sort of put it out there. Here's a statement. Here's what we do. What are some of the hacks that come along with a good, successful leadership program like that that's really driving that purpose forward and ingraining it into the organization?
Mm-hmm. Well, without a doubt, I believe it's because of the culture that we have and our values, and we call our values creeds. And we have defined what our values are and what the leadership behaviors are that each creed attributes, right? So to give you an example, we have a fairness creed, and it means that everybody can speak their voice, use their voice to share their ideas and perspectives, and we listen to one another, right?
Mm.
We value diversity of thinking and what everybody brings to the table. And so that creates like a very safe environment to learn from one another and to collaborate. It's not about being in a room who has the title holding the conversation. Everybody has a voice at the table. And so I think because of that, because of the culture and these different creeds that we have, and everybody really adhering to them, right? And being brought along on the journey as we've grown as a company with what does that leadership look like, that has enabled the success, the accountability, the ownership at the team levels, the aspiration to continue to do more and do better and say yes and fail fast if it doesn't work. So culture, without a doubt, has been the recipe for success.
Yeah, I love that. I think it's great to see that, and I know that's one thing that, as we work with you, always hearing kind of those stories, reading it on the website, reading it in the report, it really, you get the sense that is there. What do you think it's going to take? I mean, when we look on your website, you can go and you can quickly find your climate action plan, and there's some ambitious things in there that you're hoping to do and that are probably on track to do, right? You want to continuously reduce energy consumption and fuel optimization. You've already made headway on this plug-in shore power infrastructure, adopt drop-in sustainable marine fuels, which you've already mentioned that you've made progress on, advancing nature-based solutions to climate change and engaging partners and shaping sustainable marine fuel policies. So actually my first question, I guess, will be, how's it all going? Because there's some ambition there. And then I guess, what role does leadership play in helping you drive success and driving progress towards on this action plan?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, how it's going. It's never going fast enough from my perspective of where I sit, but it is moving along, right? Like, there was a time when I didn't even know what was possible in terms of sustainable marine fuels. And now we know very clearly what that is and what that looks like and where it's available and what needs to change from a policy perspective or cost perspective for greater adoption to accelerate the net zero ambition. The teams are owning net zero. The marine team that I work with, they get it, right? They've enabled the first test of advanced waste-based biofuels on board. They know efficiency optimization is where we need to start, and they're committed to that. So I have the support of the team, and I think from a leadership perspective, as a leader here at Virgin Voyages, part of the role is always asking, how can I help? What can I do to support your initiative? And that's the kind of support that I personally have received during my time here, whether I'm talking to the CEO, the CO, the CMO, they understand the importance of an initiative like decarbonization to the brand. And they ask, for someone like me, who's ultimately not responsible for delivering on this huge ambition, I can't do it by myself.
That's right.
They ask, what can I do to support? What do we need to know? What's next? How can we continue to strive towards that ambitious goal? And that's been great, to have the support from the highest levels, even at the board level, in terms of advancing change. And sometimes we're not able to advance at the rate that we want to because of financial constraint or technology constraint. But the ambition is there, and it's just a matter of, making the case very clear in terms of this is what needs to happen, making the financial argument really clear. And so having had the support of the other teams on how I need to frame information has also enabled us to make progress, because it's a lot. Decarbonization is a lot of different pieces. It's, there's implications to the company. There's a lot of unknowns. Policy is still being even written in some cases. And so them just asking questions and helping me understand where the business is at has also enabled me to frame the goal and the objectives in a more clear way so that everybody can get on the same page.
So it seems that communication is really here at the heart of it, because I'm hearing you talk about financial, making the financial argument, making the business case for it, but I also hear you receiving information from leadership of like, hey, here's where we're at, here's where we need to be. It's a two-way conversation. You also need to, I'm sure if you're saying that all of your team is on board with net zero, that also probably didn't just happen organically. There was probably some intention there. So I guess talk about that communication flow back and forth between you all, between leadership, you, and the rest of the team, back to you, back to leadership. What does that entail? How's it working for you?
Yeah. So I think the most important thing, and probably this is true of a lot of sustainability leaders, is framing your own position as being part of the team, right? That my role is to help the other team be successful, right? And we're all on the same team. And that I don't have all the answers. I am not a technical expert. I'm not a fuel expert, but I know what questions to ask. I can see the future with where policy is going based on being part of industry conversations, so I'm kind of looking ahead, and operations are looking at, optimization, saving money. They understand the hardware. And so I think it's just making sure that you're creating an environment where you're building trust and showing respect and appreciation for your teammates who have a lot of knowledge to bring, right? Like I said before, I didn't even know what does a sustainable fuel look like, right? And I had to learn about sustainable fuel, and I had to learn it from our own teammates, right? And I had to understand what the implications of changing from one fuel to another were from a risk perspective, in terms of running an engine on board a cruise ship. So, and they know this information. They are experts at what they do. They're very good at what they do. And so I believe I've built trust in the organization and the different teams that I work with. And I think it's really key, that communication, as you mentioned, the two-way conversation, the being willing to help, find answers, and taking the time to socialize content so that everybody understands, right? So it's not, me from the outside saying, hey, this is what you need to do. It's saying, hey, this regulation is coming. Are we thinking about this? How are we thinking about this? What experience do you have in looking at this, maybe in your past lives, since you've been working in the industry for so long? What questions do we need to ask? So it's really kind of coming into the challenge at the same level as everybody else, and then just leading the conversation to find the answers and being willing to, get the external information to the team to take the conversation to the next level and the discovery to the next level.
So you've got to be intentional in it, always be listening, hearing what you need to. But I think just like you said, building trust, building those alliances. Jill, what advice I often like to ask just what advice would you give to our listeners, but I want to put a little spin on it. Let's say you had a CEO of a company in the elevator with you, and you start talking about what do you do? And they're like, well, what should I do? We're trying to build, we're just in our earliest days of sustainability. I'm not sure where to start. I'm looking to hire somebody. What advice do you have for somebody in a leadership position as to like, hey, here's your role in this? Because I don't think we often talk about what the role is of leadership and how important it is in this space.
Yeah, that's a really good question. I don't know. I mean, you really have to understand the culture that you're in, but if they're a transparent, approachable leader, I would start with asking them, what do they care about? How do they see their business thriving 5-10 years from now? Or what keeps them up at night? What are they worried about? And so if I was in that elevator situation, I think I'd want to understand, what is important to them as a leader in the brand that they're leading. And then if it sounds like they're open to it because they're asking the conversation, what do we need to do? I would say, let's get a group of people together, across the business to have this conversation on what does the future, not so far into the future, but what does the future look like?
I think that's really great. I think you zeroed in on something really important, right? Finding what's meaningful to you, find what resonates with you, and find the connection point that, where there's impact on the company as well in the future.
Mhm.
That's a great way to approach it. What I know it's your job, but I know just from interacting with you and working with you that you're good at staying up on things and keeping up with what is expected of your role in a company like Virgin Voyages. But are there other leaders or organizations that are really inspiring or motivating you right now, or other industries where you're just like, ooh, there's some great progress over there, or what drives you the most?
Yeah, I mean, I do enjoy keeping up with what peers in our industry are doing, because it is such a dynamic industry to be part of. But looking outside of that in terms of just sustainability leaders, I mean, being part of the Virgin brand, Holly Branson, for me is quite inspiring because of her commitment to really make sure all Virgin companies have this heart of, changing business for good. So personally, I find her really inspiring. But as far as other brands, there's not a specific brand that I find inspiring, but I have noticed that in tourism, there's more attention to mitigating the risks of climate change to like assets that like hotels have, right? So hotel buildings, I noticed just recently one initiative where they were going, I saw a job posting actually, it was on LinkedIn, and a hotel company was looking for marine scientists to help in their climate change mitigation strategies. So essentially, if you think about it, hotels are at risk. The coastal hotels are at risk of basically losing their assets, and they're trying to understand how they can, get more lifetime value out of the investments that they've made. Do they need to put in a seawall? Do they need to plant mangroves? I mean, that I thought was, wow, what a sign of the times, where climate change is really hitting home for some companies.
Yeah, hitting home, and I think that's also what's going to drive the most action, right? It has to be connected to the business,
right?
Because I think that's something I've been hearing a lot of lately. It's just like the days of doing sustainability work for the sake of just doing it because it feels like the right thing to do are kind of over, right? It has to.
Yeah.
There are enough business cases for the big work that we're doing to really. So that's up to us to find those
Absolutely.
connections constantly. Speaking of that kind of big picture, I always wonder as well if I had to try to get it out of you. Is there a particular, or if you were programming our show, let's say, what sustainability topic would you choose to really lean in on? If you had to kind of pick one, because there are, like you said, we're supposed to be working on everything from deforestation to ocean acidification to pollution to emissions to carbon to methane, you name it, right across the board. But which one of those do you really think people should dive deeper into or learn more about? Or I know it's a tough one to zero in on, but
It is so tricky, right? But I think one that I've always just been really interested in, because I think there's different approaches that you can take, is like, can anybody just hack the materiality process? Like what's really worked, and what has just been more of like I have to do it for reporting purposes, but it hasn't actually led to engagement internally or change. And now with double materiality, it's just fast. Like materiality has always been something that's been of, interest to me, like the process of getting stakeholders aligned on materiality, like the actual steps that you take. Do you do a survey? Do you do interviews? How do you narrow in on your topics? So anyways, for me, because I have been part of different organizations and workshops in that field, and now you see it becoming kind of layered with what you have to do according to a specific framework, it would just be really interesting to see like who's really hacked the recipe on how to make it something that's truly useful in building a strategy and engaging the right people.
Well, Jill, I'll have to guide you to an episode that we just did with Sam Vianney at Valuing Impact. he's doing, he's putting a monetary value on environmental and social impacts across the value chain. And it serves sort of as your materiality assessment as well, because they have to go in and identify, hey, these are your most material impacts environmentally and socially. And then they are able to kind of say, and if we put them all together, here are the ones that stand out above. So it helps you decide what programs are the most meaningful. There are some that are just feel-good stories, but once you put the data together, it's like, ooh, actually, those aren't having as much of an impact as this other story over here that we're barely even talking about. So it's really interesting. I'll send you the link to that and the work they're doing. But I like that. Well, we'll wrap it up here, Jill. Thanks so much for all the great stories and advice. But let's try to wrap it up for the audience. So if we had to really boil this all down, whether it's leading with purpose, the importance of the work you're doing, based on what you've learned this far, what are a few good takeaways for the audience, that are, whether they're doing sustainability reports, or maybe they're more advanced, doing their double materiality assessment? What advice do you have for the audience? What takeaways can we leave them with?
Well, I would say work with your culture, and probably that's one that most sustainability leaders know, but really you only go as fast or as far as the culture will take you. That's been my experience. Reporting, I feel like, when you're starting out on building a sustainability strategy or programs, there's a lot of value in starting with writing a report. We wrote our first report before we were even operational.
Oh, wow.
And that was really, really helpful just to set the framework to say, okay, this is the foundation, and here are pillars, here are the initiatives that we're going to build out in the future. We didn't even have data, and we did our first report. So I think the storytelling aspect is really important because it brings your stakeholders along, whether they're internal or external. And then the third takeaway I would say is that success in this type of role, no matter what you're working on, whether it's materiality or, advancing a program, is the relationship building piece and collaborating with your teams and appreciating the expertise that everybody brings to the table and making sure you're creating a safe space to dialogue and share learnings with one another.
Yeah, and I think adding on to that, that relationship piece, it's forming good relationships with your whole team, and also I think especially with leadership, right? So you've got to have that magic touch to be able to have those deep relationships that will help you build trust to get the work done. Jill, thank you so much. Thanks for all the exciting work that you're doing. We're looking forward to next year's report and hopefully another even bigger produced video, just because the work you guys do is so fun. So we'll leave the links to where people can go to keep up, with the website. You guys have a great blog. There's all sorts of stuff going on. People can download all of your reports and action plans over there on the website. Anywhere else we need to drive people to keep up with you?
I think the website is the best place. Yeah.
That's the best place. And the YouTube channel, because there are also some other great videos that aren't just focused on sustainability.
There are some fun YouTube videos.
Well, Jill, thanks so much. We'll talk to you soon. Thanks for being on the show.
Yeah, thank you so much, Derek. This is fun.
We'll talk to you later. Hey, thanks for checking out our show today. This show was produced by the team at thinkPARALLAX, a sustainability and communications agency with 2 decades of experience working with companies at every stage of the sustainability journey. We are experts at assessing where a company is today, defining a North Star, and developing a roadmap to get there. If your team needs sustainability guidance or training, or you have a recommendation for a guest or a topic on the show, visit us at thinkparallax.com. We'd love to hear from you.